I think the things that Rainer and I appreciate in common about tolerance include the following. We appreciate the richness and complexity and variation in the term, as a concept and as a practice. We both regard its history as a potted one, and we both regard its operations as reversible, sometimes emancipatory, sometimes subordinating, sometimes both at once. We also share a concern with the capacity of tolerance to wound, what Rainer tends to put more often at the level of insult or stigma, what I tend to talk about more in terms of subordination or abjection. But both of us recognize that tolerance does not simply reduce conflict or promote collective thriving. We're both aware that tolerance is not only or always what it says it is. We also share an appreciation of tolerance as a nested notion, a notion that never stands by itself, but whose specific contextualization really matters for its operation and for its effects. And we share an appreciation, above all, of the inseparability of the problem of tolerance and the operation of tolerance from power. Tolerance tends to operate discursively as if it has nothing to do with power, but both of us have our eye on the extent to which it is always imbricated with power. So in all these regards, we're much closer together as students of tolerance than either of us are to, for example, analytic philosophers who tend to treat tolerance purely conceptually, or than either of us are to pure boosters of tolerance who simply cheer it as a kind of benign, positive virtue and politics in multi-religious, multicultural, or conflict-driven societies. So that much we share. There are many ways, though, as I said, that we are not simply speaking in different analytic registers about tolerance, but often, I think, are not even speaking about the same phenomenon in our critical engagement with tolerance. Rainer speaks of different stories or conceptions of tolerance. He opposes most strenuously what he calls the permission conception and the respect conception, and he wants to promote the respect conception, where mutuality and equality inhere, and he wants to minimize or object to the permission conception, where you're tolerated on a set of conditions, you're given permission to exist, but all the power is in the hands of the one who has permitted you existence. And that's where domination and stigma inhere for him. He speaks of tolerance most often in contemporary terms as a virtue or an ethic made necessary by collisions in ethical or religious beliefs. The case for toleration, Rainer argues, arises when one has an ethical but not a justified moral objection to something. And it's a useful distinction. It's one he draws forward from Bale and successfully renders, I think, as a contemporary formulation of tolerance that makes tolerance look pretty good. In other words, what tolerance at its best is believing that somebody who is different from you in their beliefs or practices has the right to their beliefs or practices, even if you find it wrong or objectionable. Following Bale, Rainer argues that non-repressive toleration occurs when one knows that one's own judgment, one's own ethical or religious judgment, is a matter of faith rather than reason. Tolerance is necessitated, Rainer says, because one has a negative judgment in the first place. You don't like or believe that other thing that the other person does, but tolerance is enabled because faith rather than reason is at stake. That's it in a nutshell, yeah? I got the nutshell. Okay, all well and good. I actually don't disagree with any of this. I do wonder about the ease with which the reason-faith distinction can be drawn, especially outside the realm of religion, and much tolerance discourse today takes place on objects that have nothing to do with religion. That is to say, it's not about belief. We don't tolerate only belief. We tolerate people, things, practices, cultures, sexualities, where we're not talking about those things as beliefs, we hope. I do wonder as well about the normative background, even of these moments of tolerance. That is, even if you decide that your belief in the naturalness of heterosexuality or white supremacy is but a matter of faith. It is the Arab or the homosexual who is the candidate for tolerance, not the heterosexual or the Englishman or the Frenchman.